Good morning, everybody. All right. Hopefully everything's coming through. Let me know if everything's coming through all right. Um Trying to play around with a few things recently, so hopefully I haven't completely completely destroyed the setup and everything here. So it looks like it's going well on my end, but let me know. Welcome. Hey Mel, good to see you, CW. David in Thailand right now. Wow. Yeah, I actually had a client that was in Vietnam this week, and so it was a 12-hour difference, which it's looks like it's 12-hour difference for me to you, uh, David. So is that on business or is that on vacation? Sweet. Thank you, Wilson. All right. So, welcome back to Dev Mentor Dave. As you guys know, I'm not necessarily a morning person, so I've got my coffee with me this morning. Even though it's 10 a.m., you would think I would be up and around and moving by 10 a.m. But but yeah, it's a little bit of a struggle this morning. So the voice feels a little bit lower. So hopefully everything's picking up fine. You guys can follow along as we go today. So long story. Okay, that's all right. We'll let it pass, David. Um, So as we get started here, just a reminder, I already see a couple of you have liked. Thank you for liking. Go ahead and click the like button for me. Obviously, probably most of you are already subscribed. So if you're not subscribed, hit the subscribe button and click the bell icon so you get the notifications when we do go live. I'm assuming that happens. It happens for like my test accounts, but do you guys get like notified when I go live or reminders or things like that? I assume that you probably do. Uh, but let me know if you don't for some reason, because there might be a setting that I need to change on that. But yeah, so if you're not subscribed, hit the subscribe button. That way you get those notifications. Hit that little like button. Reminder there. Um, and thank you. And then we'll get started here in just a minute. Let some people get flowing in. I see a few people still coming in right now. Also, don't forget that if you are not in the Discord channel, especially if you're participating here um, in the Deep Pockets project, I gotta get used to saying that now that we have a code name. So, if you're participating in that, hopefully you're already in the or planning to participate. Hopefully you're already in the Discord channel or the Discord server. If not, make sure you jump into that. The link should be in the description and hopefully it works. So if it doesn't work, let me know and I'll get another one in there. Not sure why it doesn't work sometimes, but hey, that's the way that it is. So um, we will let's see, get an email if I click. Okay, cool. So yeah, they've got some notifications out there, which is good. You'd think that after doing this for a few weeks, I'd know all these things, but I don't. So, especially doing this on a regular basis, I've done some other live streams, kind of standalone live streams in the past, but this is kind of the first foray into a weekly or scheduled one that happens fairly regularly. So it's good to know. I assume that YouTube was on it. They definitely want people to jump on these things, so that's good. All right, so again, join the Discord channel. We've got lots of communication that happens. I know this week was probably a little light if you were in there this week and um, maybe wondered where I was. It was just a little bit of a busy week with family stuff and church stuff, and then work, of course, obviously takes up a large bulk of that time. But just a very very busy week for me, so I wasn't in there quite as much as I normally am. But but I try to be in there, at least have it up and see notifications and stuff if you guys are posting things, and especially if you're trying to get a hold of me. Obviously, I'm not in there 24/7, so there's going to be a delay more than likely, depending on what I'm doing and how busy I am. But But definitely jump into that Discord channel if you've got time, if you've got questions, if you even have suggestions for the live stream or for future videos, things like that. So definitely jump in there and be a part of that discussion. So yes, it is. It's definitely hard to work on the holidays, especially not just when you have people coming over like we do tomorrow, but you want to enjoy the holidays too. And honestly, I would, not to jump off topic here, but I would encourage you to do that. I would encourage you to take the time, enjoy the holiday. I mean, obviously, at some point this year, I'm gonna be gone. I'm not gonna have a live stream on a Saturday because I'm gonna, go on vacation or just out for the weekend or something like that. So, well, I know at least probably 2 times for sure. I won't be on a live stream here, but that's a good thing. That's gives us a chance to recharge. And in fact, I put a live clip out from our last discussion last week, just talking about burnout. So you need to be careful about that, even while you're learning. It's not just an issue when you become a developer, but even while you're learning and growing in your skill set, you need to take that time. You need to enjoy those holidays, enjoy the family members, and hanging out with all those crazy people that that do weird things, but are connected to you by blood or marriage. So enjoy that, enjoy that time. So don't work too much. All right, so I wanted to take a minute and just kind of talk through the feature ideas, the MVP feature ideas that you guys have put through. I'm not going to go through the list of them right now, but what I am going to do is I'm going to post a link in the Discord server on the channel for the live stream project. And I need to rename those to the DMD, or not to the DMD, to the Deep Pockets project. So I'll try to remember to do that. But I have a spreadsheet that gets updated when you guys post responses to that Google form. Thank you, Google, for putting all that stuff together so I don't have to. And I'm going to post that here in the Discord project updates. And I just did it just now, and I'm going to try to pin that. Yes. Okay, so that should be pinned. I might go back and edit that and add something to it, just so you know what that is, since it's not just more than a link. But I did want to just real quick come over here and show you what that looks like. So you guys kind of be familiar with it. Timestamp. Obviously, all of your responses are anonymous right now, so nobody knows who put what in. So that way you don't have to be embarrassed, and you can't boast. So it's a two-edged sword. You can't boast about putting in good stuff, and you don't have to be embarrassed if you don't like what you put in compared to somebody else. So, but this is a list of all the things that people have put in so far. Some people really got crazy with it, which is good. You can put things in one at a time. You can put things in a big list, like this: basic features, extra features, or big massive list features. Whatever fits in your style, and whatever fits in the paragraph form for the form. So feel free to jump in and add more of those this week. Next week we will go over those. I'm gonna look through it probably Thursday, Friday of this coming week, and I'm going to do a little bit of filtering. I will remove some things that I disagree with, and probably condense everything down to where we've got a more specific list. Looks like somebody else is already in here. Oh, me. I cracked myself up. Okay, so oh my. So hopefully this will help maybe spur on some other ideas. So thank you to, I forget who it was, somebody mentioned it, and I didn't think about it until this morning when they mentioned it in the Discord channel. So take a look at that. Feel free to add more. You can't, I don't think you can add more to this. You still have to use the form. So use the form and push more entries into it that way. But I thought this would be the easiest way for you to see what other, excuse me, what other people have put in. And hopefully it's helpful for you to think about things that maybe you haven't thought about when it comes to the features of this project. But next week, we will take a look at kind of what those MVP features are that you guys have submitted, which ones I think make the most sense. And maybe there might be some things that we look at that nobody thought of that really needs to be part of that MVP. So again, we're talking about a lot of stuff here that's it's very much high level. It's very much planning. We're not writing any code yet, and I told you it would probably be April before we actually started writing code, and that's very true. Obviously, this is the last live stream in March, so so hopefully you guys are okay with that, because this is really important. In fact, I have I kind of coined a phrase as I was thinking about this earlier this morning, and that is, the better you plan, the better you program, right? So the better you plan, the better you program. And this is something that is just, it's something that I have just found true over all the years that I've been developing, as I've been a junior developer, just getting tickets. Actually, I've never actually just been a junior developer who worked off of tickets. My very first projects really were pretty much doing it like this from start to finish. So maybe that's a good thing, maybe that's a bad thing, I don't know. But it at least ingrained some habits in me for developing projects, and hopefully doing it well for the most part. So the better you plan, the better you program. And that is why we're spending so much time here at the beginning talking about not just how you interact with a client, but talking about how you plan out your project. And just because I'm giving you a process doesn't mean that that's necessarily a perfect process, or that that's going to be the best process for every company. Not that every company is going to use the same process, but these are some very general good things that you probably should put into your process when you're interacting with a client, maybe in a freelance situation, or where you're interacting with your team and trying to come up with the best solution for your team. So this is not by any means a perfect plan. It is not it is not the standard by any stretch of the imagination. But I want you guys to understand, and hopefully you'll see this as we get to writing tickets and things like that. The more and the better you plan at the beginning, the easier it's going to be for you to write tickets, the easier it's going to be for you to know what you're going to write from a code standpoint. The easier it's going to be for you to understand how the data works. We're going to talk about data today. So all of that information, all that planning, that discussion with the client, getting information from the client and how they want to use this application, or what are their pain points and things like that. And then even things like what we're going to be doing today, talking about data, thinking through the data that we're going to need, thinking through the features that we're going to have as part of this MVP, then that makes it so much easier to sit down and code. Because again, probably 80 to 90% of writing code is not the writing code. It's the thinking about what code needs to be written. And if you have already thought through, I need to do this, and I need to do this, and I need to do this, it makes it much easier to write the code, especially when you've been writing code for a good amount of time. Obviously, if you're just learning code at the same time, it's going to be a little bit more difficult. But if you've already thought through and you already have planned out the logic of things, then it's going to be much easier for you to just sit down and write the code to do what it is that you're trying to do. So that's why we're going through all of these maybe frustrating parts of the process here, because even though as a junior developer, you might not be able to participate in that with your team. That might be like a lead, or even somebody that's outside of the dev team might be doing a lot of that, like a business analyst or project manager or somebody like that. It's good for you to at least understand the process, and it's good for you to make sure that you know how to do that on your own, because sometimes, let's just be honest, if somebody else is doing it, they may not do it very well. And I've been in situations where we've had tickets from a project manager or from a BA or somebody like that put those tickets in there. They weren't very good tickets, and they didn't really help us know what we needed to program. It was just kind of a very um, loose idea. And so you need to be able to think through these things on your own and ask questions so that you can clarify those tickets if necessary, so that you can go do the work. The worst thing that you can do, or the worst thing that can happen to you while you're programming, is you get done writing a bunch of stuff, and all of a sudden you've got to go back and rewrite stuff. You've got to rewrite file after file after file, because you were either given the wrong information or you made assumptions that were untrue. And so that's why the better you plan, the better you program, is true. If you can plan things out before you start writing code, you will be able to write code faster and more accurately. So that's why we're going through all of this process. And quite frankly, it'll just make you a better developer. It'll make you faster, and it'll make you more reliable to clients if you have some of these skill sets. So that's why we're going down this path. And again, I'll probably say something like this every week, just as a reminder, because I know as we're still in these opening phases, it can be a little bit frustrating. Sorry, I keep hitting my mic. I don't know where my hands are today. So hopefully you guys are on board with that. I think most of you are. But if you're coming into this fairly fresh to the project, I just want to make sure that you're hearing why we're doing things the way that we're doing, and hopefully not spend too much time on that. Okay. It should be anybody that has access to the link should be able to get in, but I will look at that later, Mel. Thank you. Yeah. Okay. Yeah, I get this. Mel, thanks for saying that. This part makes me feel inadequate since the project has yet to be broken down. It's hard to know. It's hard to know what to learn in order to contribute. I totally get that, especially if all of this is new. That's part of the learning process, though. So don't feel like you don't have anything to contribute. I would say contribute whatever you think you can, and as we go through it, you'll pick up kind of some of the things that we're doing. In fact, the first thing we're going to do here is I'm going to give you an example of how I delineate my features. All right, so we didn't really do that last week, and so I want to do that for you so you kind of see how I go about that process, and hopefully that'll kind of help a little bit jumpstart how to maybe think through this. And again, this is my process. This is not necessarily the company that you're going to work for, that you do work for, how they do things. It just depends on the person and the company and the project and all those things. Yeah, exactly, David. It really is more about soaking things in than necessarily having it all perfect. So, all right, let me jump over real quick to a different screen. And what we're going to do is we're going to start off with a different project just to make everyone really confused. How's that? I need some coffee because this might be fun. Again, if you're jumping on here live, we've got a few more people here on the live stream. Say hello in the chat if you're watching live. Let us know where you're from. If you have any questions, put multiple question marks in front of your questions just so I can see it as we go through. Especially if the chat picks up more, then I'll need to be able to see that on the fly. So, all right. We're going to kind of take a step back just slightly, and I'm going to introduce a different project. just to make things more confusing. And this project is really just to demonstrate what I want to talk about today. So ignore this project after this live stream. It has nothing to do with our Deep Pockets project. This is just to help me give you some ideas of how to do what we're talking about without doing what I've asked you to do. So I want you guys to still do the work of creating feature ideas and data structures and things like that we'll talk about here in a few minutes. On the budget project, I don't want to give that to you, so I'm gonna jump to a different project. And just one I thought of literally this morning was employee time tracking application, right? So basically an employee goes in, they click a button to punch in, they click a button to punch out. It records that information, and then the owner can go in and they can edit that information, and they can see a report. That's just something that's pretty basic, right? I just want something very simple, very basic, but something that was more than just a to-do app, right? So hopefully you guys understand what I'm talking about there. And again, this is a completely separate project to the Deep Pockets project. That might be hard to say. It's a different project from Deep Pockets. And so you can ignore this project after this video. This is just for you to see how I think through things. And maybe that'll help you kind of as we go through this process. So let me move over to this. Okay, so this is the kind of the first steps. Make that bigger. There we go. All right, so this is kind of my first steps based on what we've talked about. So I have a project ID or project name, right? So employee time project data, time tracking project data. Man, I can't read today. I need some more coffee. Hang on. All right, and so after having talked to, oh, Sudan, wow. Studying in India, awesome. I assume it's pronounced Ali. Good to have you. By the way, if I ever pronounce somebody's name wrong, just let me know, because I want to try to pronounce things correctly. I don't want to be offensive in any way, if possible. So, and hopefully you're not offended if I do say it wrong. Okay, so employee time tracking project data. So I've talked to the client. I've asked them, what are you trying to accomplish? What are the things that you want it to do, right? And so after talking to the client, these are the features, who was myself. These are the features that I came up with. So this is just kind of how I think of things when I think of features. I kind of think of them in terms of actions or in terms of visuals, right? So either in terms of this is what I want to be able to do, or this is what I want to be able to see, right? So that's basically how I've broken out these different pieces of the project. So the first thing that I want to do is I want to allow employees to add, edit, and delete. Well, actually, I don't want to delete. I'm sorry. First thing. I'm jumping ahead. First thing I want to do is be able to add, edit, and delete employees as the owner. So I need some sort of awesome. Thank you, Ellie. So I need some sort of interface that's going to allow me to, as the owner, add, edit, and delete employees. As I think about this now, there probably needs to be a user management piece of this. So this would be user management to a degree. But we'll probably need to assign roles, right? So we're going to assign roles to the users. And I'm just going to write out, well, we'll wait on that. So I need to be able to assign roles. That's going to probably be part of this, add, edit, and delete employers. But it's something I didn't think of when I first wrote this out. So, excuse me, we'll add that to it. Okay, next bit. So that's user management, right? Fairly straightforward. I don't think we're going to worry about logins at the moment. So for this, there's going to be a drop down that has the user information, and then we're going to um, on top of that, we're going to just give the buttons that they need to log in, log out, right? So no login features, punch in, punch out, not log in, log out. So no login features or anything like that. But we do want to be able to add employees and assign them roles either as like a manager so that they'll be able to see reports, or just as an employee that checks in and checks out. Okay, so then we have the employee clock in. Should probably do clock out just so we remember. Feature. Maybe even add like a lunch out, lunch in. So just several options here. So they're going to punch in, then they're going to clock out for lunch, then they're going to clock back in for lunch, and then they clock out for the day, right? So something pretty basic, but we want to make sure that we're covering all those pieces of functionality in this. All right, and then we're going to want to give the employees a way to view their own timesheet. This typically you would put behind some sort of login. But again, this is just a simple example, so we're not going to go that deep into it. All right. Owner, add, edit, delete timestamps. So we want the ability for the owner to be able to edit that information. So that's going to be another way that we interact with that data, right? So, and then we want the owner to be able to view a report of the employee's hours and the total number of hours. So hours by day. Let's put that in by day. And the total based on a specific date range. So starting from here to here. So again, because people get paid, oh, interesting. This fits with our budgeting software. So people get paid in various different ways, right? They get paid weekly, they get paid monthly, they get paid bi-weekly, they get paid at different times in the month, like twice a month or something like that. So they get paid multiple different ways in that process. So hang on one second. Copy. Boom, boom, boom. Haha, there we go. I want to get my overlay on the screen. Sorry. I should do that before I go live, right? All right. So these are kind of the basic features, and hopefully maybe that helps you think through or understand how I think through features. Even as I'm writing the feature, I'm thinking about sort of what that will look like as I'm doing it. Man, that looks a lot better on white. So, anyway, sorry. So this gives you hopefully an idea of what that looks like from a feature standpoint. So as you're maybe adding more feature ideas for MVP, that will give you some ideas of how you can go about putting those in a way that'll make sense to me, and hopefully this makes sense to you. So if you have any thoughts or questions on that, feel free to throw them in the chat, and we'll try to walk through those. Okay, so finally, after half an hour, the topic that we really we're going to discuss today. So, all right, so data. How do we handle data? One of the things that we need to do at the beginning of the project is make sure that we are using that we're planning out the data that we're going to interact with. And really that starts with, I've got kind of several questions to ask, but these are not necessarily in a specific order. I think sometimes you can maybe do them in a different order, but I think this order probably makes sense. I don't know that I've ever sat down and actually thought through like, this is exactly how I do it. It's just kind of something that I've learned and done over the years. So hopefully it makes sense as I go through it, as I've tried to sit down and think through how would I explain this in a step-by-step process. Because that's one of the things about growing as a developer, you just kind of, you get used to doing certain things. And so you don't always think about what you're doing and how that, how that needs to be explained to people. So, but that's part of mentoring, right? It's explaining things in a way that people can understand. All right. Ooh, from Zimbabwe. Awesome. So I assume it's Ashley is the name. Is that right? From Zimbabwe. Good to have you here. All right. So let's talk about data. I'm going to try to move this up a little bit because it's getting in the way of my hands. Here we go. All right. Let's see. Okay. Let's talk about data. What kind of data do we need for this project? That really is kind of the first question. When we think about all of these different features, when we think about what we're trying to do with this, what is some of the data that we're going to use, right? So I've talked to the client, I've asked questions, I understand what they're trying to do. And so hopefully I've got features that have been written out that make sense. And now I can actually think through what information are we going to actually be working with. All right. So let's just take this first feature right here. First feature is add, edit, and delete employees. And this is how I like to think of my data. So I kind of go down the list of the features that I have. Hopefully they are in some sort of order that helps me do this. But I go down the list of features and I kind of fill out my data requirements as I go. All right. So first thing I'm going to need here is employee information, right? So I'm going to need employee information. Oops, employee info. All right. And I'm not going to get too far in the weeds on that at the moment because we're going to show you another tool here that you guys can use. So we've got employee information. We're going to have role information. And then, excuse me, then we're going to need to have, what's a good term for this? Punch information, activity information. We'll call it activities, right? So activity info. And then we're going to, let's see, employees view timesheet for the current week. So when an employee is viewing their timesheet, is there any information on that view that would not be part of what we have here? So obviously we might show their name. Probably won't need to worry about their role information at that point, but we'll need to know what activity they have, right? So we'll definitely need to get the activity information. On that page, we'll probably do some sort of total so that they can see how much time they've put in for the week. I can't think of any other data that they would need for that specific view. So I think we've already got all the data we need up to this point. All right. So owner, add, edit, delete timestamps. Timestamp. What's we'll call it? Timestamp info. That makes much more sense than activity. All right. See, sometimes you have to talk through these things and come up with good verbiage for your data too. All right. So that's part of the process as well. Okay. So owners interacting with the same information, the same timestamp information, the same employee information. So we don't really need any other data for that, data types for that. And then reports, again, is going to be based off of the same information, right? So we don't need any other information. So really, the data that we need for this application is pretty simple. It's pretty straightforward. That's one of the reasons why I picked this. I felt like that would probably be a pretty simple setup, right? But it's going to be something that we need to think through, and we need to think through it so that we can put the data in the right buckets. All right. So we'll want to make sure that we have the right buckets for the data that we're putting in here. Okay. Now, remember, you can't answer these questions without talking to the client, right? This is why we talked about the fact that research is required. You need to understand the idea. You need to understand the industry. You need to understand what the client is looking for in order to build this application. Because we could go off and start adding all kinds of other things to this, all kinds of other data that we'd want, and that may not be what the client needs. For example, let's say we want to auto-populate holidays, right? The client didn't ask for us to auto-populate holidays, and we might have even asked the client, hey, do you want to auto-populate holidays? And they would have said, nah, I'm not worried about that. We'll just deal with the actual hours, and then he'll manually go in and add hours if they get paid for holidays, right? And so, but if we didn't ask those questions, then we wouldn't know that they don't want to worry about holidays. But so we might come here and say, oh, you know what? Holidays might affect how this application needs to work. And so we'll come in here and we do holidays. All right. And so we, there's another piece of data that maybe we don't need, but we think that we need it because we're trying to think through all the options. So that's why you definitely want to talk through, even when you come up with ideas, bring them to the client and say, hey, does this make sense? Does this help you in any way? And does it make sense for this to be part of the MVP? Maybe adding holidays to this is going to be a much bigger part of the project than you would think it would be. And, once we think through it, once we evaluate it and kind of scope it out, then maybe it doesn't make sense from a budget standpoint to put that into this project for the client. So we don't want to just add any data that we think about. We want to add data that specifically correlates to the features that have been improved as part of the MVP. All right. So we've got employee data, role information, timestamp info, and holidays. I'm going to leave holidays here just for a second because it kind of works with some other kind of our next piece of information. So one of the questions, I'm going to move this up on my notes because I'm jumping. One of the questions that we need to ask probably near the beginning here is where is my data going to come from? So we've got multiple pieces of information, multiple types of data, right? We've got employee information, role information, timestamp info, and holidays. And the question that we need to answer is where does this data reside, right? How are we gonna get this data for our application? Is it going to be stored in a database? Is it going to be something that is just calculated on the fly? Excuse me. Is it something that is going to be inputted from a user interface? Is it something that we're going to pull in from an outside external API? Is it something that if we're pulling it in from an API, are we going to store that information, or are we just going to pull that in every time? So when you're thinking about your data, you have to start with the types of data that you need, but then you need to figure out, how am I going to get this data? Because how I'm going to get this data also informs how you're going to store information and how you're going to program that connectivity, right? So employee info, we've got the ability to add, edit, and delete employees. So we know just based off of this feature that this information is going to be user input, right? All right, so employee information is going to be user input. We're going to have a form. The user is going to type that information in. That's going to come back into the database, and we're going to store that there. All right. Hey, everybody. Good to see you, Justin. Good to see you. I think it's Anurag. Let me know if that's right or if I completely butchered it. Good to see you all. So know the types of data and then know how we're going to get this data. So user input for the employee information. We're not going to pull anything from some external source to get our employee data in this instance. Roles. Now, roles is interesting. So roles could be something that is user input. Roles could also be something that is just static data, static information, right? So for example, we could make roles something that is stored in the database, but not something that the user actually manipulates, right? So let's say the employer doesn't want to create a bunch of roles. They don't want to interact with adding and editing and deleting roles. They just want two roles. They want 2 roles or 3 roles. We give them 3 roles. They want 3 roles, and those 3 roles are the only roles that he ever assumes he's going to need, because it's going to be a very simple application. And so we have to ask the question, well, how are we going to use those roles? Where are they going to come from? Are they going to just be in the code? Because we could just hard code the role information, the role types. So let's say we've got a manager, and we've got an employee, and we've got an owner, right? So those would be the 3 role types for the different users. And so we want to make sure that we have a plan for that. And that could just be code. I've worked on many projects where, you had certain data that was just static data that was never going to be changed. And we just put that in the code. It may be a better idea, especially if you think you ever are going to add to or change. It might be easier in the long run to put it in the database. Again, that kind of depends on your planning and your project. So you could go either way on that, but that's role information is going to be more of static information, right? So I'm just going to call this static. And again, so that's going to be something that's in the code, or it's going to be something that's maybe in the database but isn't updated based on user input. All right. Then we've got timestamp information. Timestamp info comes from two different places, right? So the first thing is user input, right? So we've got user input. So this is the form that somebody's going to click. They're going to click a button that says I'm clocking in, right? And then they're going to click another button that says I'm clocking out for lunch. I'm clocking back in for work from lunch, and I'm clocking out for the day, right? So we've got the 4 options that they'll be able to do. But they're not setting a specific time. They're just clicking a button, right? So we have the user input. We have the user action. They're going to select their name. They're going to click the action that they're doing. So there's user input into this timestamp information. But then we have the timestamp itself. And so the timestamp itself is probably going to be something that's programmatic, right? And so that's going to be either something that the front end sends to the back end, the actual time, or maybe the back end gets the time currently based on the server time, or depending on your database and what you're using there, it just automatically populates the exact time of that entry, right? So like a created at date or something like that. So timestamp information actually has 2 different originations of its data, right? So this is going to be user input, and it's probably going to be what I call programmatic. So we've got user input, we've got static data, we've got programmatic data. So this is something that either your code is going to create, or something is going to automatically create it programmatically, right? All right, so then we have holidays. And again, we're not going to, the client has already said they don't want holidays, but let's say we didn't ask them. And so we're thinking through this data. So this could be, again, external, right? Let's say I don't want to manage all of these holidays. I don't want to put them in every year because that would be a huge pain. So I want to see if I can find an API that has that information that I can just pull that data in. So now I may store that information so that I only have to pull it in, every so often, especially if I'm paying for access to that API or something like that. Or this could be something that maybe I download a document like a CSV file, and then I upload that to my database. So it's going to be external and maybe static, right? So you're getting it from an external source, but it's going to be static in your database from that point on. It's not going to be something that you're going to interact with. All right. So we need to think through not just what type of data we have or that we need, but also how we're going to get that data, the origination of that data, and sort of how we're going to use that data. So like origination and usage kind of go hand in hand there. So hopefully that makes sense. Let me know if it doesn't make sense. We're probably going to go a little bit long in this first hour, just FYI, since we kind of got started a little bit late. I was talking about other things early on instead of jumping into this. So if you weren't here at the beginning, feel free to go back and watch all that, but we kind of got started about a quarter after. So I assume we'll probably be done about a quarter after with the main information here. Hopefully, we'll see. Okay. So what data do I need for my app? Where should my data originate? So how am I going to get that data? And then how am I going to use that data? All right. So we kind of talked about that a little bit already in how we're going to get that data. But again, this is where your features inform the information about your data, right? So for example, employee information. How am I going to use this employee information? Well, I know that I'm going to be getting that as a user input. So I'm going to have forms. I'm going to have views for seeing that information. Role information is just going to be program. So this would just be used in the code, or maybe we'll use code, right? Because the role information we're just going to be assigning inside of a form, right? So it really is just kind of static information. Holidays would be more code based, because again, we're not interacting with it really in any way. But the timestamp is going to be based on forms. We're going to need to view that data, right? So, and again, this is just kind of thinking through some of these things as we go, right? How am I going to use this information? Am I going to need to manipulate this information? That's something that's very important, especially when you're thinking about data and data storage. Am I going to need to manipulate how this is stored? So like, for example, we've got timestamp information. We know that the owner is going to want to manipulate that potentially. Let's say that the employee didn't clock out correctly, right? Or they didn't clock out at all. And so the employer needs to be able to go in and edit that information. So this is going to have to be what we call mutable, right? Or changeable. It can be transformed. This is not going to be mutable. So we're just not even going to put anything there. This is going to be mutable. So the employer is going to need to be able to go in and interact with that and change that data, right? So we have holiday information, which we're not going to use because we didn't talk to the employer about what they wanted to do. But then we've got all this other data, and we know how we're going to get the data. We know the type of data, how it's going to be used. We know whether or not it's going to be changed. Another thing to think about is who is going to be able to access that data, right? So this would only be owner access, right? This, again, because it's code, that nobody's really going to be able to access that. So we'll just like no access. Timestamp information, this would be accessed by owner and employee. This would be more for just the creation aspect for the employee. And then holidays would be no access, because that would just be static again, right? So again, I'm just kind of thinking through, how am I going to use this information? This is the information that I know I need for this application. How am I going to use this? And again, this is not necessarily a perfect way of doing it. It's not necessarily the way every company walks through it. I'm more walking through my thought process than I am necessarily walking through my like how I actually write things down. In fact, I don't necessarily always do this. I kind of do a lot of these things at the same time as I'm thinking about the project and as I'm frankly starting to build out my database structure. So I tend to think about these things while I'm doing the database structure. I don't usually just write them all out, but I want you to see my thought process in this in how we're going through this. All right. So what data do we need? We've got the data types. Where should that data come from? Where are we expecting that to come from? How are we going to use that data in the application? Is there going to be storage? Yes or no? Or like, for example, holidays, maybe that's just going to be an API call every single time. Might not be a great idea, but it could be something that you do. Are we going to manipulate? Are we going to transform any of that data? We're going to visualize it. How are we going to visualize it? Who's going to have access to it? All these types of questions are things that you need to ask, and probably more that I'm not thinking of here on the fly as we go. But you need to start thinking about all of these things related to data, right? How are we going to interact with this data? Again, goes back to the better you plan, the better you program. So the more you can put into the thought process at the beginning regarding your data, how it works, the better you're going to be able to program that, and the faster you'll be able to program that later on. All right, so next question that I would ask is, how does my data need to relate to other data? Right? This is really, really, really important. And in fact, a lot of times people don't really even think about this until they start building out their data structure. And again, I typically do all of this as I'm thinking about the data structure, but there's a lot of times people just kind of build these buckets of information, but they don't think about how that information is going to correlate, how that's going to work together, and how that needs to be connected, right? So I always try to take time at the beginning of a project and say, okay, here's my data. We're going to exclude holidays for now. Oop, where's my mouse? There we go. We're just going to bump him out of view. All right. Oop. So how do I have my data? I've got my data structured. How do I know how this data should interact with each other? Right? So, for example, we've got employee information. How does employee information interact with roles? And how does it interact with timestamps? Because that's going to be really crucial when we start developing our application. We need to know, how am I going to pull the timestamps for this particular view, right? So let's say we've got the view where an employee can view their current timestamps for the week, their timesheet, right? So how am I going to accomplish that? Well, I'm going to need to have some idea of relationships between my data. And hopefully you guys know these things. This is not something new, but if it is, great. So I want to just kind of write down some of these relationships. So employees are going to have, I'll put has, so employees have timestamps. And, we should probably do this. We should do users instead of employees, because an employee is actually a role type, right? See, the more you think about these things, see, I'm going through this and I'm going, wait a minute. Employees have timestamps, and they also have roles, but a role would be an employee. So that's why thinking through this process helps you find some of these issues, even with the way that you're thinking about things, right? So this is actually user information, not employee information, right? So a user could have timestamps. A user could have a role. So this would be something that we would assign just one role per user. There are, one-to-many relations. So that would be your timestamps. Absolutely. Wilson, good call. So a user is going to have timestamps and it's going to have a role. So a role, so there's sometimes you would have roles be like a one-to-many relationship where, especially if you're assigning multiple roles to a user, I guess that'd be more like many-to-many. But if you're assigning multiple roles, sometimes you'll do that in your program. In this instance, they would just have one. So we're going to have the owner of the role be the user, right? And again, when we're thinking about how that data is used, that role is going to determine what that user has access to in the application. So that's another thing to think about. That's more on the code side, but it's information that you might put in here. So let's just type that in. So access restrictions to application. All right. So we're just putting some notes in there about what that data should do for us. Right. Okay. So there might be a place where eventually we would add permissions. Let's say we've got things on certain screens that we want one role to access, but not another role, but they both need to view the same screen. Well, now we might take roles to another level and add permissions. And so we can have roles that own multiple permissions are kind of actually permissions that are assigned to multiple roles. So as you can see, this can get really complicated really quickly as you start digging into it. But that's why you go through this process, right? That's why you go through this process and say, okay, well, what do we need? And as we're talking through this, maybe we need permissions so that we can do this type of view the way that we want to do it, or the way that it's been designed, right? And that's something to keep in mind too. Usually, some of these things are happening at the same time. For example, right now we might have somebody out there working on the designs and the workflow designs for this application, so that when we're done with the data and trying to figure all that out, we have some designs and we can start programming once we figured out what we're going to program this in, right? So this is a whole thought process that we go through to make sure that we're finding everything. And as we go through it, as you're seeing, we're finding things that I didn't think about earlier today, right? So, and feel free to throw some others in here if you think of things that I'm missing as we're talking about this data. Let me know. All right, so roles. I like to do belongs to here. Part of this is because I tend to think in terms of Laravel and models and things like that, which if that's the route we go, we'll talk about that some. So roles will belong to users, right? So this just kind of lets me see both of those connections when I'm thinking about this. And again, we'll talk about how we visualize this here in a couple minutes. But I want to write this out so then I can do the visualization later. Hey, Bob, nice to have you. Wave there. All right, so we've got user info. It has timestamps. It has roles. Has a role. Sorry. So this is multiple, and then this is singular, as you can see. So that's why I'm writing it that way. Roles belong to users. All right, and then timestamps, if I can type, belongs to. All right, so this would be hello. Okay, belongs to users. Man, I cannot. Okay, and technically, yeah, this would be a many to many here. Well, actually, it'd be one to many, because each timestamp would it'd be 1 to 1. Yeah. So this belongs to one user. So each timestamp belongs to one user. You have to kind of think through those things. All right. So each timestamp belongs to one user, but users have multiple timestamps. Hope that makes sense. All right. So how does my data relate to other data? And let's just, for fun, if we've got holidays, maybe holidays, I don't know how that would fit. I don't want to think about it. All right, so here's our basic data. We know the types of data that we need. We know how we're going to get that data, where it originates. We know whether or not that data is going to be static or if it's going to be changeable, mutable. We know how that data is going to relate to other data in our application, right? And all of this really is informed by the features that we've developed. So that's why, again, it's really important. We're going to keep open for another week the feature form. So go in there, add more features as you think through what the MVP should be. Add more features to that list, and we'll go through a lot of those next week. But part of your assignment for the day, or for this week, is going to be write out your data structure. All right. So your features are going to inform the data structure, and ask these questions. Okay. So let me just go over the questions again. So what data do I need? What types of data do I need? Notice we haven't filled out any information about this. We're going to do that here in a second. All right. So what types of data do I need? Where does my data originate? How am I going to interact with that data? So does it need to be mutable? Does it need to be stored? Am I going to get it from someplace else? Will only certain people have access to it? How am I going to visualize it? Excuse me. Do I need to change? Do I need to manipulate anything or transform anything in order to show it visually on the front end. So all those questions about your data. And then finally, how does that data relate? How does users relate to the other data? How does roles relate to others? So as we know, roles don't really relate to timestamps at all, right? So we don't have anything there. Roles belong to users, timestamps belong to users, users have timestamps and a role. All right, so that's just kind of the basic concept of thinking through your data structure. Now, we haven't really talked at all about what belongs in these buckets. These are just our main data types and data buckets, for lack of a better term. All right, so here's what I want to do next, because the first part of your ticket or your homework assignment is to go and build out, write out, think through those questions, think through, and I'll post those questions in the Discord server so you guys can see those. I'll pin those in the project information channel, project updates channel. So you can kind of walk through those steps for yourself as you're thinking through, as you're looking at the features that you've put in or that you've listed out, even for yourself or for us that you've pushed into the application, to the form. So that's part one, right? So part one is going through this process and thinking through what type of information you need and all these questions that we've asked, right? Oops, sorry. Part two is taking that next step and figuring out what information you need in those buckets and putting it together in a way that is easy to visualize, easy to understand what you're doing with that data and how it's connected. All right. So there's a tool. Somebody actually threw this tool in the Discord server several weeks ago, and it's one that I actually had never seen before, but I'm pretty impressed with. So what's the code name again? The code name is Deep Pockets. All right. Deep Pockets. But this is actually a pretty cool program, and we've used it here over the last few weeks, actually, on a project for the company that I work for in one of my teams. So I'm actually pretty impressed with the capabilities that it has, and so I want to just kind of show you what that looks like. And what I'd like to do is have you guys. Hopefully, this is not going to just blow your mind and make you feel like you need to quit. All right. I think all of you can probably do this, especially if you go through the process that we just went through. Right. So if you go through the process that we just went through, I think that it'll make this a much easier for you to work through. Okay. So let me show you. This is from dbdiagram.io. All right. dbdiagram.io. And again, some of you may already be familiar with this. I don't know if maybe, they've taught this someplace, but it's, oh, that's kind of fuzzy and yucky. When I zoom in, let's see. That's kind of, let me refresh and see if that gets better. It's a little bit better. Okay. That's good. Hopefully that's a little bit clearer for you. All right. So this is, how you start, right? And what we have here is tables. And I'm talking about tables because there's lots of different ways that you can handle your data from a database structure standpoint. I know for a while there was a lot of push to use things like NoSQL databases or document databases, and those have their place. I'm not saying that you shouldn't use those, but 99% of the projects that I have built have generally used relational databases. So relational database has tables, rows, columns. And again, when you think about our data and the fact that it needs to relate, relational databases make sense for most of our applications. Now, are there some applications that don't need that? Absolutely. You might be building something that doesn't have any visualization, that's just taking in information, manipulating it and storing it or something like that. And maybe all you need is like JSON objects as documents, right? So I'm not saying that this is necessary for every application. I'm just saying in my experience, almost every application I've worked on has used a relational database. So we're going to go that approach. obviously with this project, sorry, I'm making a decision. We're going to go that approach with this project, and we're going to go, and I would assume most of the time you're going to go with that. Yeah, David, we're going to do a relational database. It just makes the most sense for how the application works, in my opinion. So I have worked on a project that used document database, that used NoSQL database, that was an application backend like this, and it did not go well. It was not easy. It was not easy because when you start manipulating data, especially when you start manipulating those relationships, you're trying to pull information about those relationships. It just gets more complicated, and in my opinion, and it's not as clean as using a relational database. So yeah, we're gonna go with a relational database for this. So as you can see, we have some visualization here, right? So again, this is just how it comes up when you create a new one. So we're gonna change this here, and we're gonna try to just do this in the next 5 or 10 minutes here, so you can see it, and then we'll be done with the main part of the live stream here. So we have our tables. So this is a table, this is a table, this is a table. We have 3 tables. We have the table name, so table name, and then we have our different types of information, and then we have our references. So the references tell us those relationships, right? And I'll be perfectly honest with you, I have not built anything in this yet. So you get to see me learn something new as I go through this. I've seen it. I've had somebody else on our team show it to me and show me the information. I've seen them change stuff, but yeah, so this will be fun. Okay, so the first thing we're going to do is we're going to make a table called users. Oh, we already have a table for, oh, well, here you go. We'll call this roles. Here we go. All right, so we got roles and users. Let's move users up to the top, just because that's how I like to structure my data. Do these things go away? That's annoying. Oh, hang on. All right. So we'll get rid of this, and we'll get rid of this. Haha, see? Learn as we go. All right. The text gets, good question, Justin. The text on the left of the screen is not really necessarily anything. If anything, I would call them probably JSON objects, or maybe it's probably interfaces. Is probably a better idea, but you could think of them as like JSON objects. All right, so we've got users and we've got roles, and we've got this guy here. So we're going to call this timestamps. Timestamps. There we go. Okay, so users. So users, we always want to have an ID. We are going to make a connection between a role and a user. So we're going to make a foreign key here. So we're going to call this role ID, and this will be an integer. And let's see, do we do foreign key here? Foreign key? Is that a thing? Nope. Okay, it's not a thing. Fine. Fine, be that way. All right. We'll make that connection here in a minute. All right, so then we'll have employee name. We'll just keep that varchar, and then we'll have created at, let's see, I think that's fine for what we need. We just need their name to be displayed. We need, we're not doing anything with logins. We're not doing anything with notifications. So we don't need emails or anything like that. So as you can see, this is where I would come in and start building out based on the information here. I'm building out my structure, right? The text with the background. Yeah. Yeah, it's sort of. It's something that they've created to be able to build out there. That's why I say it's not really anything, necessarily. It's something that they've created that they are then parsing to be able to create the visualization on the side in real time. So, okay. Something that we do and that I think is really good is we try to keep all of our keys, all of our relationships at the top of the table, at the beginning of the table, and all of our timestamps at the end of the table. So let's say we wanted to do like updated at, and we wanted soft deletes. If you remember back here, we said that editing, and deleting employees should have a soft delete. So if you're not familiar with a soft delete basically means you leave the row in the database, but you provide a way of telling the front end that is no longer that it's no longer there, right? Why would you use soft deletes? Well, you would use soft deletes for an instance where you want to still have information, especially that is related to that. Because sometimes if you get, let's say we wanted to pull up all the timestamps and we deleted a user, but the timestamp is still deleted, or the timestamp is still available, and now it's referencing a user that no longer exists. Well, now we're going to get an error from the database. The database is going to say, hey, that user doesn't exist. I don't know what to do with this, right? And so the reason you use a soft delete is that way you can still pull that user's information, even though you don't want them in the drop down anymore because they're no longer an employee, right? So we would do deleted at. Sometimes you would do something like an archive where it's not deleted. So, so it's still available in some things, but timestamp. But, it's not something that that you want to be unavailable, right? It's just something that's archived, and there's different reasons to use different things with that, but we're just going to go with created at, updated at, deleted at. All right, so we'd have our timestamps at the end, and we have our keys at the beginning, and then our other data in here. So in here, maybe this might be a place where we would put like a username, or we might put an email, maybe a password, right? Something like that. So this would be hashed. All right, so this would we put our other information kind of here in the middle. And as you can see, as we're building out users, it's building out a visual for us to see how all of this works and how it's going to relate. So you can kind of see that ahead of time here. All right, so this is a pretty cool tool. I've used other tools in the past. This is honestly one of the easier ones that I've used so far. So jump in. In fact, I'd like for you guys to build out, I'll mention this here in a minute, but use this application to build out your diagrams. All right. So we've got our users, we've got our roles. All right. So this is a little bit interesting. Following. That's weird. I don't even know what that means. All right. So for our roles, we're gonna have an ID. Whoop. And that's going to be a primary key. And then we're going to have a title. And that's just going to be varchar or varchar, depending on how you say it. ID, title. Really, that's all that we need. We can do created at. We can do updated at. Like, we can just copy all this. There we go. Those are good things to have. If you're building a bigger application, you might do something like created by ID. So in that case, I would put those IDs down here with the timestamps. Even though you typically would put IDs and keys up at the top, that kind of fits more with the information here. So I'd put it down here. So like larger applications, you would want to track that information sometimes. So you might put that in here, but we don't need that for this. And then we have timestamps. We've got the ID integer. We've got the user integer, and we've got, we don't need this. Let's see. That's an interesting question. Would we ever need a status on a timestamp? Something I didn't think about would be timesheets. Would we need to store a timesheet that needs to be approved? See, this is just part of the process, right? You have to start thinking through these things. So maybe we come back here and we go, the owner's probably going to want to approve timesheets. So let's come in here and let's do time sheet info. And let's see. So this is going to be, a timesheet's going to be programmatic because it's going to be based on a week, right? So he just does it bi-weekly, not bi-weekly, but he does it weekly. And so it's always going to start Sunday through Saturday. All right. So the timesheet information. Separately. Yeah, if you're tracking employee IDs, that's a good question. GUID for ID and then employee ID separately. Yeah, we're not worried so much about that in this application. Again, we're trying to keep this as basic as possible. But yeah, you may have instances where you need to use an internal ID like a GUID, and then you've got actual employer IDs for other purposes that you would store in there. That would be different. Your timesheet seems like derived data instead of primitive data. Absolutely, yeah. So this is going to be something that's built programmatically. So at the end of the, but it's going to be something that we're going to be able to approve, right? So we need something stored in order to do that, right? So it's going to be programmatic. It's going to be built that way. It needs to be mutable. There we go. And that timesheet actually would probably be where we would make that connection for the view of the timesheet. I don't know why I didn't think about that before, but there you go. So it's going to need to be accessed by the owner and the employee. So I'll copy this. And it's going to belong to the user. All right. All right, so we've got timesheet information. Again, this is just to help think through that process of how we're going to use that. All right. You guys are chatting about GUIDs. That's awesome. All right, so let's add our timesheets in here. Well, wait, hang on. Let's go timestamps. Timestamps, we've got enter, we've got a user ID. We've got status would not be one, just I think instead of using created at, we'll do a timestamp, which will be a timestamp. And then we'll keep track of this information too. Because it may be that the owner goes in and updates it, or they may go in and delete it if it's erroneous or something like that. So that way, we still have record of it. We can see what happened to those timestamps if we wanted to pull that up later. All right, and then last, user. There we go. All right, so lastly, we'll do table. Whoop. And this is really touchy. I don't like that part. All right, so table. Yeah, I know it needs a block. Leave me alone. Okay, table, timesheets. Okay, so table timesheets, we're going to have an ID for the timesheet. Integer. I should just copy this stuff, shouldn't I? So I don't look so bad at typing. Primary key. Let's see. So the timesheet's going to be owned by a user. User ID, integer. All right, and it's going to have a status. So we'll need to know what those statuses are. Are those statuses static? Are they static statuses? So this might be, let's see. Is there an enum type? How do we do this? Nope, that's not what I want. Enum. I would think there's a way to do this. New unknown column setting new. That's okay. See what happens when you don't know what you're doing? Enum. We'll just leave it at that. So we'll use enums for that database. I'm just deciding that now. ID, user ID status. That would be created, approved, denied. And we're going to need a pivot table. So typically we like to do this alphabetical, which is basically the same thing. So timestamp underscore timestamps, timesheet, right? All right, so we'll have an internal ID, integer. So this goes back to how things are related, right? So timestamps, we have multiple timestamps attached to a single timesheet, right? So we're going to do primary key, and then we'll do time stamp ID, which is integer, and then timesheet ID, integer. Why not? Just add this for fun. Okay. All right, so we've got this stuff in place. Whoop. Come down here. All right, so here's all of our table definitions. Now, as you can see over here, we've got lots of tables, but we've only got one relationship in all of this. So let's make these relationships make more sense. All right, so we're going to go from the timestamps user ID. Let's see. Many to one. I wonder what it would look like. Ref users.id to timestamps.user.id. Timestamps. That's really annoying that it keeps popping up all these errors while I'm typing. Users.id. Does this do anything? Oh, that's interesting. Okay. Boom. Okay, so the arrow is this goes to that. Interesting. Okay. So I don't know why. I just like going from that way to that way. Okay. So we've got a reference from users to timestamps, and we need a reference from users to timesheets to timesheets dot user ID. All right, so now we've got this connection here. Let's move timestamps up here, timesheets over here. All right, so here's our user interaction. We can see that visually. And then over here, we got roles. So we're going to do, say, ref users.id to roles. Oops. Actually, this would be roles.id, and it would be going to users.id. Right? Actually, I wonder, is there like a equals? Many to many? This is where you have to ask the question, how do you use this? Let's see. If anybody knows, let me know how to make this relationship. For now, I'm just going to do this. It's not technically many to one. It's more one to one. But anyway, you can see the visualization. So we've got users connected to roles by the role ID. Actually, sorry, this should be users.role ID. That makes more sense. So there's the role ID connection. And we've got user ID connected here. And then lastly, we need to connect timesheets to timestamps here. So we'll do ref timestamps dot ID goes to timestamp underscore timesheet dot timestamp ID, and I'm going to copy this to make this faster. And so this would be timesheet and timesheet. All right, timesheet sheets, not times. There you go, timesheets. Boom. Okay. So we've got the timesheet ID coming here, timestamp ID coming here, and here we have just a very basic database structure for our application. All right. Yeah, Bob, we're not doing many roles. So we're just going to have one role. It's going to be in a drop down. So yeah, it's not going to be many to many. Good call though. Yeah. This is how VS Code annoys me. Yeah, I think that's probably not a VS Code issue, Mel. I think that's an issue with probably the plugins or the extensions that you're using. But I agree, it can be really annoying for that stuff to just be popping up. Okay, so there's stuff down here I should probably look at. Highlight relationships. Ooh, nifty. There we go. So you can see the relationships being highlighted. Auto arrange. What's that do? No. I'm sure there's some other documentation around here that you can find to do things the way that you want to do them. But this is just a good way to visualize the information that you're going to need for each of those data types and how those pieces relate to one another. So when you start programming, when you start building out your application, you know, okay, if I'm building the timestamp or the timesheet, I know I'm going to need to pull in timestamp information, and this is how it's connected, right? When you're building, for example, in Laravel, you'll build out models, and you'll actually tell it, this is how these different models are connected. And you would find all that information based on your data structure, all right? So hopefully this is helpful, and hopefully I haven't just completely blown your mind. Maybe you need to come back and rewatch it. Obviously, we always have the Discord channel, which just popped up. We always have the Discord server. You can jump in and ask questions along the way as you're building out. But what I'd like for you to do is write out, and you don't have to submit this, but just for yourself, write out the answers to those questions as you're thinking about the features for Deep Pockets. When you're thinking about the features for Deep Pockets, think about what those data types are. Think about where the information is going to come from, how it needs to be stored, does it need to be manipulated? Think about, how that data is going to be related, to the other data. And then use that information to come in here to dbdiagram.io and write out what you think that data structure should look like from a table standpoint. And as you saw, as we went through, we realized there's other things that we need to add to this. So it's going to be a work in progress. Even though I said, even though I said that the better you plan, the better you program, that is absolutely true. You still need to understand that that doesn't mean that you'll get it right the first time. Even today, we have to go back and revise things at times, even as senior developers, as a lead developer. Sometimes you don't have all the information, even though you might try to get all the information. You just may not have all the information that you need until you get into it further and realize, oh, we need a timesheet table. We need a timesheet, timestamp pivot table. We need to add these things in here that we didn't think about before when we were thinking about data and how we were going to visualize that, how we're going to interact with it. So I know there is a way to put in the enums. I just don't know what they are right now. What that is right now, but you might research that. If I find it, I'll throw that in there into the Discord channel as well. So, but that's what I'd like for you to do. So what you can do, let me hop back over here. What you can do is you can save this. So you have yourself your own account So you can save this, you can mark it. So this is the time tracking app example. All right. So time tracking. Whoa, what in the world? Go away. Time tracking app example. All right. So hopefully that saved that. And then I can share this. All right. So I'm just going to copy the link here, and I will post that in the Discord channel as well. All right. So what I'd like for you to do is, once you have a data structure, maybe later this week, Wednesday, Thursday, something like that, I'd like for you to submit, it may even Friday, I'd like for you to just post the link to yours inside the Discord channel. And that way others can see it, and we can pull some of them up. When you post the link, I'll put those in there as well. Just mark whether or not you're willing for me to put it up on the live stream. That doesn't mean that I will, but that way I know who's okay with me sharing their ideas on the live stream. So we've gone about a half hour over, so I just want to make sure we get that out to you guys so you know what I would like for you to do. So I'd like for you to go to dbdiagram.io. Again, I'll put all this in the Discord channel, and write out, after you've thought through what your data should be, write out how you think that should look from a database table standpoint, and how those relationships work with one another as well. Okay. Again, sorry for being a little bit long-winded, especially those of you, I know it's very late for many of you, and you don't always stick around, for the after hours Q&A and questions and discussion. So hopefully this has been helpful to you. Again, not necessarily fun for everyone. I'm a bit of a geek. I kind of like this piece of it, or nerd. I think nerd is the correct term. I like the data side of things. You might not be a data person, and that's okay. You still need to think through some of this though, because you'll need to know, if you're a design person, then you're going to want to know what information you need to put into your designs, right? If you're building a form, you need to know what data needs to be in that form. So you need to think through these things and have a process for thinking through that. And so hopefully this is giving you some structure. Again, not a perfect structure, probably not necessarily what even your company might want you to think through, or how they might want to demonstrate it, but it's at least a structure to get started with, so that you can start working through, how do I think through this idea of data, and how am I going to use this data? How am I going to store this data? How am I going to interact with this data? So hopefully it's helpful to you as you move forward. Yeah, nerd. Thank you. You're a nerd too, Bob. Is that what you're saying? All right. So hopefully this has been a help to you. Again, we'll kind of put a sock in it here on the actual live stream content. We'll stick around for at least another half hour. I probably will cut it off here at 12 my time. So here in the next half hour, if anybody wants to just hang out and chat about different things. But if you're just here for the information and for the project stuff, thanks for joining us. If you have not done so yet, please click the like button. Again, it just helps YouTube know people are interested in this, people are enjoying this. Hopefully it'll kind of push it out to other people a little bit more aggressively and get some more people on the live streams, because that's really, I enjoy going through these and having conversations with real people on the chat. So hopefully we'll get some more people in by people liking. Don't forget to subscribe if you're not subscribed, so you get notified when I do go live. Or when I upload videos. I've got one video that's ready to be uploaded. It'll probably go up on Monday, and then I'll be doing some more videos. Obviously I might do some other clips from live streams as well, but yeah, so hit the subscribe button so you see those, not just in your feed, but you can get notified about that. Join the Discord channel, especially if you want to be part of the project, if you want to code when we get there. We're getting closer, I promise. We're getting closer to coding. Still have a couple more things that we need to go through, but then we'll get there, probably start coding in April. So I'm looking forward to it. I know you guys are looking forward to it. I know a lot of you are ready to be done with all this project information talk and just move on. Talking about, I have not timestamped it while we're doing it. I will do that afterwards, CW. Thanks for asking. But yeah, I'll jump through and since I have a notes, it'll take me 5 minutes to go through and do that. So I will go through and add the timestamps afterwards. I didn't think about timestamping it while I was doing it. Is that a thing? Edit description. Interesting. I might have to try to do that. I like to talk too much though. I may not think through it well enough. Also, don't forget, if you guys are part of the project and you're wanting to help us build it and help us build it faster, share this with other junior devs, especially who are looking to get involved in something, looking for maybe a different way of learning than they're currently doing through like video tutorials and things like that. So help share these live streams, help share the videos to other people, and just kind of help build the momentum and build the community. Because really, at the end of the day, the live streams, the YouTube videos, all those really are there to facilitate building a community so that we can come together. You guys can get answers to your questions. You guys can get mentoring as much as we can do remotely, right? You guys can be helped along your journey. Again, that's the tagline. It's not just a tagline. It's not just something that I say on my videos, helping, junior devs go from learning to code to launching successful careers. That is the goal. I want to help you know the things that you need to know so that you can be successful, not just immediately, but long-term in your career. And so the more people that we have as part of that community, whether they're junior devs, whether they're senior devs that are there to help provide some other insight, that's always great too. So definitely share this with more people. Let them know what we're doing. Let them know what we're here for, especially the Discord server. Let them know that that's available and that we're interacting more and more each week, typically, depending on the week. So definitely help me out if you wouldn't mind getting this information out, getting this, the live streams and the videos out to other people. Share it wherever you have contact with other junior devs, because my goal is to be as helpful as I can to as many people as I can. And I don't have access to everybody. So if you would help me out with that, I would greatly appreciate it. As always, if you have ideas for the live streams, if you have ideas for videos, if you have ideas for ways that we can make even the community better, let me know. Put them in the Discord channel. There's multiple channels for those different types of suggestions. So it doesn't mean I'll take them, but I certainly am interested in hearing other ideas that I may not have thought of. So let me know what ideas you have on that, and we'll see what we can do in the future moving forward. So anyway, thank you everybody for jumping on the live stream. Let me see what we have here. And see what we've got from the chat. Scroll back up a little bit because I think I saw a question. Since we haven't finalized features, how much of a data structure do we need to make initially? That's a great question, Dave. Or David. I would build structures based off features you've suggested, because it's really more of an exercise than it is the final product. So maybe when you're going in here, that's a really good question. Let me do this. Let me share this thing again. So if I'm in here, let's say I just add a comment here. So feature would be add, edit, delete users. Right? So maybe in your structure, add a comment or I don't know, can you do comment box? Ah, you can. Add information about the feature that you're designing this for. If it might include multiple features. For example, timesheets would, or time stamps would relate to timesheets. It would relate to users. So put some comments in here as far as what those features are, just so we know if we do review yours, we kind of have an idea of what that is. And so I think most of them are going to be pretty obvious from a data standpoint, but yeah, if you got a feature maybe that you think others might not have thought of, definitely leave a note. Woo! Definitely leave a note in this file so that we can see it and kind of understand what the thinking is behind that. That would be helpful. So, but I would do it off of the features that you are suggesting, not based off of like a final MVP. This is more just for you practicing the process. And then we'll kind of come together. What I'm going to do is, as the lead, I'm going to take all the suggestions. Some things we'll vote on, some things I'll just put together, and I haven't decided completely on those things. I have a feeling the features will probably be something that I will mostly just decide based off of feedback, partially because I'm the client as well in this scenario. So in that case, we probably won't vote, but we'll vote on other things as we go through this. And that's kind of how it happens a lot of times in the real world, in a real dev team. So yeah, I would do it based off of the features that you're suggesting, the features that you think are applicable to the application. So, and you don't have to do all of them. Say you've got like a 20 feature list. You don't have to create the whole data structure for everything, right? Just create the ones that you think are the most important. Because again, that makes you think through that process. What is the most important data? And sometimes even doing data helps you shrink down the features that you want for your MVP, for your minimum viable product. So all of this kind of works hand in hand to help us come to that final solution of what we're actually going to develop. So it's a very iterative process that we're going through here. So let's see. Yeah, absolutely, David. You can use this as a starting point for your models. Oops, deletes. Yeah, you definitely, that's why you use soft deletes. And that's why you have confirmation boxes when you're offering the option to delete things so that you give the user a chance. We gave you a chance to not accidentally delete something. Yeah, definitely. All right, let's see. Yeah, keeping your password, keep it outside. Yeah, absolutely. Let's see. Looked at some of this. Windows user. I like that. WINDOZE. Yeah, I'm a Mac user and a Linux user. I'm not much of a fan of Windows. C# at the moment. That's awesome. Oh, that's a great question, David. Does it let you drag a line between the tables in the UI for relationships? I don't know. Let's see. I'm going to guess no. Oh, yep, it does. Hang on. Oop. Hang on. All right. So just for fun, let's get rid of the role and user ID. All right. So I could go, if I click on role and drag, it does go down to here. Bada bing. Nifty. What do you know? They actually built something that's really useful. There you go, David. There's your answer. You might have already pulled it up and tried it out. I don't know. So this is why you need to put question marks in front of it, because I saw you guys chatting, but I couldn't tell that was a question for me. So make sure you put your question marks in front of the thing so I can catch that visually, or like a big Q or something to let me know that you've got a question for me, because I don't always see it. Right? Okay. So let's see. If a user can have multiple rows, should be mini B. Yep, we talked about that. Oh, welcome, Eddie. I didn't see you come in. I don't know if you're still here. That's all right. If you're late, you can always go back and watch it, right? Good to see you. Let's see. Are we going to be? Oh, it bounced. Are we going to be voting on what to include in the MVP of Deep Pockets project? Yes, some things. Um, some things I'll probably decide. I'll probably decide on the basic features, and then some other things that I think might be good to include, we might vote on. Like I said a minute ago, I'll figure that out and make sure that I communicate that to everybody, so that we're on the same page. But there will be some voting throughout this process. Absolutely. Yeah, one more week of MVP submissions. Oh, you guys are just helping Eddie get caught up, I think, at this point. Uh, Bob, just make sure you don't. Just be glad you didn't have to go to all the meetings to get to this point. That is so true. Especially as a freelancer, I mean, that's just what you're going to have to do. And I know a lot of junior devs usually do some projects as kind of freelance to help them build their skill set. Unfortunately, they often do them for free. But that is part of the process, right? Is going through and having all of these meetings and conversations and trying to figure out all this information and trying to drag information out of clients sometimes can be annoying and frustrating and difficult. Sometimes they already know what they want and they know a lot. They've worked with developers before. They know kind of the information they need to give. A lot of times they do not, especially small businesses and things like that. So, yeah, to your point, Bob, definitely be glad you didn't have to go through all that. I'm kind of doing it for you sort of on the fly. I've done some ideas of what I want. Of course, it's been a frustration for me, so I kind of know what I want already. But yeah, and the red tape, David. Yeah, exactly. Uh, let's see. Meetings sound like politics, with one party wanting more scope and the other side wanting less. Yes, absolutely, Mel. Man, the client will always want more than you can give them. And that makes sense. I mean, we all want to get the most bang for our buck, right? We all want to get the most product that we can for what we're going to pay. And that's why it's really important that we go through this process of planning and walking through that with the client and giving them realistic timelines, realistic expectations of how long things are going to take. Oh man, excuse me. Realistic timelines and realistic ideas of how long things are going to take, so that we can A, not hurt ourselves and our reputation, but B, so that we can help them quantify what really needs to be in the MVP, because they'll always come up with ideas. There will always be scope creep. And sometimes that scope creep is not avoidable, but you need to be able to say, okay, this is not something that was part of what we agreed on. It's going to have an impact, and here's what the impact's going to be. And so we definitely want to make sure that we go through this process. It's not perfect. It's not going to be complete. It's not going to give us all the answers that we want right away. But it is a little bit of a struggle, and the struggle really comes down to money, typically most of the time. And because we can, as developers, we can do generally most things that a client wants to do. It's just a matter of time and money. And so that's where that struggle comes in, of what goes into the MVP that the client wants versus what we can do in a timely manner within the budget that they have. So yeah, a lot of those meetings do kind of seem like negotiations, political negotiations, to get the information that we need in order to build. Yeah, good job. Yeah, Bob, good, fast, and cheap. You get two of those. If it's good and fast, it's going to be expensive. If it's fast and cheap, it's not going to be very good. If it's good and cheap, it's not going to be fast. Hang on. Good, fast, cheap. If it's good and fast, it won't be cheap. If it's good and cheap, it won't be fast. That's true, but it's hard to think through that last one. Good and cheap, and it's going to take a long time. Because usually you pay by the hour, so you don't usually get good and cheap, actually, in my opinion. So maybe you only get one in that instance, is cheap. Let's see here. That's when you make your own company and add all the features you want. Yep, that's true. You could do that, and then you can try to sell that product. That's how you get massive things like I can't even think of it now. What's that big CRM? Salesforce. They built it the way they wanted to, but then you become inflexible, right? That's why I like the job that I have. We build custom software. We build software for the client the way the client wants to work. And at the end of the day, it's going to be more efficient. At the end of the day, it's going to work better for the client. It's going to be something that they enjoy using because it's something built the way that they want to build it. So if you don't have that skill set, or if your company doesn't have the developers in house to do that, then you're going to have to go out and find somebody. And that's where people like us come in to build that application. So yeah, I'd never published the project. Well, yeah, I've been there. I've developed things for myself. And eventually I stopped using it because I don't have time to complete it too. So that's another part of the problem. I'm just as capable of adding scope creep the customer doesn't want. Absolutely, Mel. Absolutely. We can come up with scope creep. That was why I talked about those holidays, right? That's a great idea to me, but maybe the client doesn't care about holidays. It doesn't matter to what they're trying to do, right? So if I haven't talked to the client about that, now I create, let's say I spend 2 weeks on adding, which is a lot, but I spend 2 weeks adding holiday integration into this application, but the client didn't even want it. Now they've paid, or I'm losing 2 weeks worth of pay for something that they never even wanted and they don't want. They don't even want to see it. So that's why we have this process and have these discussions so that we try not to create scope creep ourselves. Let's see. 2 likes so far. I actually seen 9 at this point. I mean, maybe you motivated some people to put some likes in, CW. Thank you. David, I need to be better with the question marks. Yes, you do. It's helpful. It's very helpful. Or you can just tag me like Mel did. That's very bright. Yeah. You can we can put up your questions like this if it makes it easier. That works too, Mel. That's very helpful actually. If you can do that. Let's see. Yeah, Bob, anything's possible with enough time and money. We can do anything. Spaghetti code, hard to upgrade. I'm not sure what that's referring to. But yeah, unfortunately, especially when you're jumping into projects that other people have built, if there's not good documentation as to what their thought process was, that's why, again, coming over here, I wanted to build this out visually because I would probably take this and add some more like sentences and things like that to it. Oh, here, probably helps if I transition. Here we go. So I wanted to put this out here visually so you could see the thought process, but then I might take this and create some documentation that's more robust, that's more sentences, paragraphs, explanations of these features, of the data, of the intended usage. And I would probably keep some amount of that for somebody in the future. Probably wouldn't put all this in the README of the code project. It would probably just be like in a file someplace. But that way, let's say I bring somebody else on board and they jump into the code base and, they just have a hard time understanding what we're doing, why we're doing things. Having this documentation is really helpful for the new person. It's really helpful for me to go back and decide and find out, why did I make this decision? What was I thinking at the time when I realized, oh, that was a dumb decision. I should change that. Right. Did I even think about that in the future? Like, you get halfway in and realize, oh, we need to create timesheets. Why didn't I think about timesheets? Go back here and add that to the documentation, maybe with an update note. This was updated on such and such a day to add this, right? So documentation is really, really helpful. And that's why I wanted to go through that process of actually writing some of these things out. So you guys can see that it's helpful during the development process and it's helpful afterwards as well. So so you definitely want to make sure that you're writing stuff down, so that A, hopefully you don't write spaghetti code, but B, if somebody comes in, they don't think it's just spaghetti code. They can have something to look at and kind of help them transition into that project. So let's see. I think we need to think how the world deals with currency exchange. Jobs are going to cheaper countries. That's true, CW. But it also just depends. So, for example, the company that I work for, we don't hire offshore developers. Everybody who develops for our company is in the United States, and that's not because offshore developers are bad developers. That's just our philosophy. It makes it easier for us to manage everybody. It makes it easier for us to have meetings and interactions and things like that. Because honestly, frankly, it's a little bit nicer to offshore developers in some ways, because then you're not being forced at all hours of the night to jump onto a call while we're doing our daily business, and you've got to stay up till 9 o'clock, 10 o'clock at night to interact with us. It's not as fair in some degrees. Of course, it's not as fair in when it comes to compensation. A lot of times too, U.S. companies will often take advantage of offshore developers because of the cheaper aspect to your point, CW. And so sometimes they take advantage of that, and they put a lot of work on them that maybe needs more communication with the client or something like that. And so it doesn't create the best environment necessarily for what we do. Now, I know other companies that offshore very well, and they manage that well. They pay well. They have a process that works for that, and that's great. There's nothing wrong with that. But unfortunately, there are some U.S. companies that take advantage of offshore developers. We don't want to take advantage of them, and it just doesn't work for the way that we want to do business. And quite frankly, this is just a reality. This is, again, nothing against offshore developers or anyone from a different country, but unfortunately, there are some companies that just don't want, either from a security standpoint or just from patriotism standpoint, whatever reason, they don't want people outside the United States working on their project. And so as a company that doesn't have anybody offshore, we kind of fit that niche, or niche, however you want to say that, for some of those companies that want to make sure that doesn't happen. So it's unfortunate, but hopefully as we move forward and from a technological standpoint, as more and more countries outside the US, outside Europe, develop and they grow in their technology, they grow in their technology needs, that's going to create more opportunity. I know there's a lot of FOMO in the world about AI and things like that. AI is not going to take all the developer jobs. It will enhance how we work, and make certain things easier, and maybe shift how we think about doing development. But AI, I'm getting up on a soapbox here, but AI is not going to take your jobs. If you're not getting a job, it's not because AI is doing it for them. Because a lot of times it's doing it not very well for them if they're using it. So don't worry about AI. Not sure I got off on that, but I have a tendency to get up on that tangent. But yeah, offshore development. I think as we see technology grow in more and more countries, and countries develop more and more technologically, we're going to see more jobs open up. Is it going to be the same pay as what you get in the United States? No. I don't get paid what people in California get paid, or people working for California companies get paid, because they can demand a higher wage due to cost of living and things like that. And that's fine. I get paid very well, But excuse me. But you have to understand there's going to be a discrepancy based on who your employer is, based on where you're located. And again, employers are going to do what they can to save money. So if you're offshore, they're going to try to pay you as little as they can. And if that little bit works within your budget, works within your society and your needs, then you'll probably be happy with it. But when I look at it, I would say, man, you're getting getting cheated. But in a lot of ways. But I know that what seems like a little bit to a lot of United States developers is a lot to some others in other countries too. So I'm definitely not dogging on every country that does bring in developers from offshore. So there's some really good ones out there that do it and that pay well, and there are some that take advantage, unfortunately. Let's see. Since we're working on the project together, but likely have different styles of writing code, will you be giving some coding standards rules for the project to keep it uniform? Yes. Yes, I will. In fact, we will probably use something in our commit process that will do some automatic transformation, something like Prettier, and we'll probably have testing and things like that to make sure that we're doing things as similarly as possible. However, that's part of being a team, and being a team means recognizing that some people develop differently or write code differently than I do. And at the end of the day, we need to be able to work within a structure, but within other people's code as well, and be able to understand what they're writing, how they're writing it. That's one of the good things about PR reviews. And peer PR reviews is you have the opportunity there to go in and say, hey, you could write this a little bit differently and it'd be a little bit cleaner, a little bit easier to understand. So PR reviews help with that process. But yeah, we'll have some automated things that will help with that process as well that I'll put together, and we'll talk about that as we go. I'll probably set up the project with all of that stuff once we know what we have from a language standpoint and from an architecture standpoint and things like that. So yeah, we definitely will do some things to try to mitigate that as much as possible. But that is something that we want to make sure and understand. When you work with multiple people on a team, you're going to run into varied ways of doing things, even within standards. We have standards at my company. And even within those standards, now, sometimes they just don't get followed and you have to call that out. But even within those standards, there's flexibility to be able to develop the way that you think, because not all of us think exactly the same way. So yeah, we'll definitely put something in place for that, Mel. Yeah, wages are rough, CW. That's a rough conversation. No matter where you are, it never feels like it's enough. Again, because employers are trying to pay you as little as they can, so they can have as much profit as they can. That's part of business, right? Business 101, expenses and income, right? Budgeting 101, expenses and income. So yeah, I mean, it's a constant struggle. Unfortunately, that's one of the reasons why you see a lot of turnover in the dev market. Developers are not often very comfortable with asking for raises. Um, and even if they are, they may not have the information at their fingertips to help explain why they deserve a raise. And so a lot of times companies just don't give raises until you ask for it. And that's not a great policy. Honestly, you want your employees to feel like they're appreciated. So I'm talking to you employers. You want your employees to feel like they're appreciated. If you have the ability to give raises on a yearly basis, then you should do that. But there are a lot of dev companies that don't. Trying to think. if there's any company I've worked for where I have gotten a raise, no. There is no company that I have worked for that I have gotten a raise without asking for it. And I'll be honest with you, there's only one company that I've worked for that I've asked for a raise. I've either been a contractor in some places, or I've been, I haven't been there really long enough to ask for a raise. But basically, it was the first long-term job that I had, was almost 3 years. And I think after about the first year or so, I just needed a raise based on cost of living. And so I asked for a raise, told them what I needed, and they said they couldn't do that without moving me up to a different role, right? And so they moved me up to a different developer role, which I was very grateful for that they actually did that, which gave me the higher pay. That is the only time I have actually asked for a raise, and it's the only time I've gotten a raise as a developer. Now, I've gotten an increase when I've moved from one position to another, and unfortunately, that's often what happens is developers, instead of asking for a raise, or maybe they will ask for a raise and it's not approved or whatever it is, developers tend to find raises by going to another job. And in my opinion, that's a problem with the industry. That's not necessarily a problem with the developers. Now, if you're just not willing to ask, that might be a problem with the developer. But I think most developers see that the company doesn't do that typically. And so instead of asking, they just move on. They find something else. So compensation is not a fun topic, but it's something that we should talk about, that we need to talk about. And it's something as junior developers, you need to understand, the potential reality. Now I have other friends who are developers at other countries, other companies, who, typically they're bigger companies, and they do have a set process, a set way of giving out raises, and maybe it's a certain amount per year. Maybe there's a bonus structure along with that. So I'm not saying that every company is this way. I'm just telling you, in my experience, I have never had a company just give me a raise without me asking for it. And I've never seen anybody else just be given a raise because the company wants to give them a raise. Often what happens is there's a raise due to renegotiation, because somebody turns in their resignation, and they decide to stay because they get the compensation that they want. So it's unfortunate. But then again, a lot of times I've worked with most of my jobs have been contract, or they've been with smaller companies, and smaller companies don't always have the ability to do that every single year, or at least they don't think that they do. And so, that's part of the thing that I accept when I sign on to a smaller company, right? So it's just, those are some things to think about from a compensation standpoint, even as a junior developer, where obviously you're not going to be making a lot as a junior developer, but something to think about kind of long-term and plan for as you go. Let's see. Doing the Lord's work literally and professionally. Absolutely, Eddie. In fact, we just had our Good Friday service last night, and I preached our Good Friday service there. I don't know if it was very good, but I preached it. Let's see. Used to have a sticker from the Think Geek that said, "Go away, or I shall replace you with a very small shell script." Yeah, you should probably update that with AI. That's a good point, Bob. Very small. No, emphasis on very small. That's how insignificant you are. That's funny. Feels like companies that use AI as a replacement for developers will need to hire developers to fix what the AI makes. Like making a shed out of scraps saves money, but then than buy a shed when it leaks. Yeah, absolutely, Mel. In fact, I think I did a video on this topic a while back. Maybe I need to do another one. But AI AI is not magic. It's not a magical thing that just happens. It's something that has to be built, and it's something that has to be trained. I actually had a conversation with a friend of mine. He's actually been watching some of my videos, so I don't know if he might see this later. But I had a conversation with a friend of mine who was just playing around with some AI tools, and he asked, this is a friend from church. He asked the AI to create an image of God. And I think, he, along the way, he gave more parameters and things like that, to try to make it just to see what AI came up with, and then B, to see, how to manipulate it and things like that. And as he was going through the process, it kept adding, it had like these different like figures and stuff in there, and it kept adding wings to them. And he kept trying to tell it, remove the wing, don't get rid of the wings. I don't want the wings, things like trying to use prompts to say, hey, X-nay on the wings, right? And it wasn't understanding what he was saying. In fact, it was coming back saying there are no wings. There's no wings here. It's streams of light, I think is what he said that they were, right? Streams of light. And so he downloaded the image, and then he re-uploaded the image, and he said, describe the image to me. And so the AI looks at the image, right, and described what it was, or what it thought it was, and in the description it noted that there were wings in the picture. And my friend's like, duh. And so then he said, okay, remember that information, now get rid of the wings. And once he was able to retrain the AI to see the thing, then it was able to understand, oh, this is the feature that I need to get rid of from this image. So we have to remember that AI is not a human being. It's artificial intelligence, right? It's not actual intelligence, and it takes actual intelligence to build it, and it takes actual intelligence to train it. You have to train AI in order to get it to do the thing that you want it to do. For example, this new, I forget what it's called, this new AI that's out there that's supposed to be the developer AI. All it can do is what it's been trained to do. Now, can it do a lot of things? Sure. But it can only do what it's been trained to do, and it can only do it as well as the training it has received. I've seen jobs out there for developers to work with AI by giving it code examples. So when you go to ChatGPT or Copilot or something like that, it's pulling its information from code that other developers have written. That does not guarantee that that code is any good. There's no guarantee that the input given by those developers was very good. I mean, who's giving the training information to the developers, or to the AI? I don't know. Do I trust the people giving that training information? Just because Copilot goes out there and connects to all these different repositories, that doesn't mean the code in those repositories is good code. It just, sorry, I'm starting to get a little excited here. It just means that it has access to information for training purposes, right? But all of it has to be trained. Right? Yeah, legacy code, exactly, Mel. Like how much bad code was actually used for training Copilot? I don't know, and you've got all this new code that people are writing as training, and it just, AI is, it doesn't scare me, because there's still so much effort from developers that has to go into it. It's not removing jobs, it's creating jobs. It's creating more work for developers to fix. And because it writes bad code, unfortunately. So, or outdated code or insecure code. I've seen code that it's written that, that hackers could take advantage of. through like SQL injection and stuff like that, right? So, I mean, it's really not, it's a good tool, but at the end of the day, you need to know what you're doing to be able to use it. And that's actually kind of one of the videos I'm going to do here, this weekend or Monday. So, yeah, I'm a little passionate not against AI. I'm passionate against this idea that AI is going to somehow get rid of even junior level developer jobs. Could it remove some junior jobs? Sure. Yes. But that depends on what you're making junior developers do. If you're teaching junior developers to be thinkers rather than just ticket completers, then no, it's not going to replace it, because junior developers have real intelligence, not artificial intelligence. So, all right, climbing down off of my soapbox. Let's use code from Apple Mac to train AI. That's awesome. Let's see. Did I skip anything else after we got off on our tangent on AI? I don't know. All right. Well, if you guys have any other questions or anything that you want to discuss, feel free to drop it in the chat. Otherwise, we'll probably go ahead and cut it off. It's about 12:15, but I don't want to leave you hanging if you've got anything in particular you want to ask. Specifically anything outside of the project. Obviously try to keep all the project stuff in the original hour if we can. It might be growing to an hour and a half now. Or we just may need to cover less stuff in each live stream, which that may be what we need to do. I don't know. We'll see. It was said that ATMs would get rid of bank tellers, but with the distributions of ATMs, the need or want of bank tellers actually increased. Yeah. I mean, that's the thing. Just because you can make one thing automated doesn't mean that people want to remove the human element. I mean, just think about self-checkout, right? I know so many people, of course, most of them are older. I'll be honest with you. Most of them are older. Not as key into change, but I know a lot of people who really hate self-checkout. And they really they just don't want to use it. They want to interact with a human being. They want somebody else to do it so that they don't have to, right? They don't, even though all they're doing is the same process. They're just swiping stuff over the scanner. They don't want to do it. They want somebody else to do that. And the only other way to automate that would be have a robot to be the one that does the swiping, so it doesn't, just because you automate one part of it or make one part of it programmatic, it doesn't solve every part of the problem necessarily. And it doesn't necessarily give us something that people want to use. So those are all things to consider when we think about automation. I, not too long ago, I was at a McDonald's, used one of those kiosks. Honestly, it was kind of a pain in the rear to use. I did not like it. It just wasn't, in my opinion at the time, it wasn't a very good interface compared to just telling somebody what you wanted, right? I spent more time at the kiosk typing in, figuring out where the things were that I wanted on my order than I would have just walking up to the counter and saying, I want this, 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 and this, telling a person who's trained to already know where those things are on their screen. Boom, 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 done, pay. There we go. Right. So just because we automate something, or just because we create artificial intelligence, or just because we create a program for something, doesn't mean that we're creating a better experience. And so that's something that we need to think about when we're talking to our clients. Why do they want this application? What is it? How are we going to make a better experience for them, for their users, when it comes to what we're actually building? Because especially if they're already using some software, going to this software that we're developing, there's going to be training that needs to happen, because they're going to be used to doing things a certain way, and now we're going to ask them to do things a different way. And so people don't like change. That's just a reality of life. We just don't like change. We like things to be the same way all the time, so we can do it quickly, especially in a work environment. So yeah, we need to be very careful about just assuming because something's automated, because something is is done programmatically, that it's better. And I think that's the part of the problem with AI is we're assuming that just because we stick AI into something, we've made it better or we've made it more useful. And that just may not actually be the case in the end. I use self-checkout. Something came up as niblets. I had to ask a human what niblets were. Turns out sweet corn are niblets. That's crazy. uh, yeah, I mean that stuff just happens. That's just the reality of development. And again, that's why we go through this process at the beginning of our projects, right? To understand what the client actually needs and to build what the client needs in a way that's going to make their life better. That's why I love software development. That's why I almost never build websites anymore. Websites are necessary. Websites are helpful. I hate building websites because I want to build something that's not just a billboard, not just an information hole, right? I want to build something that helps people in their day-to-day life. I want to build something that gives them functionality, that gives them a purpose and help in what they're doing. And applications do that, whether that's on a computer, whether that's on the web, on a mobile phone. I want to build those things because I want to make people's lives better with the software that I write and not just make billboards for companies online. Um, there are companies that's all they do. They just build website after website after website for different purposes. And I know developers that work there and they're okay with that. And that's fine. Some people are okay with that. It's a good paycheck. Great. I'm not saying that you're bad if you prefer something like that. It's a little bit easier. You don't have to put as much thought into it. That's fine. It's just not me. I want to build something that's functional, that works, that makes somebody's life easier and better. So yeah, if it's not useful, if it's not better, it's a waste of time. So, all right. All right. We'll give you 8 more minutes. If anybody has any other questions that I can prattle on about for 8 minutes. uh, Again, thanks everybody for jumping on here. We're starting to kind of get a good group of characters, but obviously feel free to share this with anybody else. Here's a quick question. I should ask this when we had more people, but how many of you guys have done some sort of training either in a classroom or online where you're interacting with a teacher and potentially interacting with other students in like a classroom type environment? How many of you have done that versus just like learning on your own, doing tutorials and things like that? I'd be interested to see. Maybe I'll put a poll up about that. Have I done a poll on that before? Let me see. I feel like that might be something I did. Let me go look. Doop-a-doop-a-doo. Community. Poll. Nope, that's not it. Oh, I did do that. Yeah. Boot camp, career training, college. Yeah, so most people are self-taught. About 10% boot camp, college, about 30%. Interesting. In college. But yeah, almost 60% are self-taught through YouTube and courses and things like that. Yeah. Yeah, I think classes are good if you can afford them. I think for the most part uh, you can just kind of learn what you need to online, especially if you have some place to go to talk to and ask people what would be a good next step, right? Someplace like the Dev Mentor Dave Discord channel. Hey, this is what I just learned. What should I do next? Things like that. So I think that would be helpful. There was a reason why I asked that, and I can't remember now. why I asked that. I should have written it down. um, yeah, mostly solo learning, none. Yeah, yeah. In my opinion, this is just my opinion. Hopefully, I don't get ridiculed for this. But in my opinion, we lost a like. Somebody gave me a dislike. But in my opinion, we the best developers that I've worked with have been self-taught developers. And again, that's not a knock against any training. It's just something that I've noticed. Now, I've worked with some really, really smart and good developers who went through college, right? So I'm not saying that that's like only self-taught devs are good developers. I'm just saying most of the devs that I've worked with that I really felt like not just knew what they were doing, but were interested in and enjoyed learning new things, enjoyed going through processes like this and asking questions. Those are just kind of factors that we have to do as developers. And if you do that when you're learning development, then you're just kind of setting yourself up better for the long haul as a developer. So yeah, I enjoy seeing how many people are actually self-taught, um, and by self-taught, learning on their own, right? Without necessarily a specific program or training or classroom session or anything like that. So that's cool. I plan to do a full course and fill in knowledge gaps, but first need to get a good job to pay for it. I hear you, Mel. I definitely hear you on that one. Yeah, unfortunately, I mean it's expensive, and frankly, I have issues with a lot of the boot camps out there. But um, even a good boot camp is pretty expensive here in our area. I want to say it's around 13 grand last time I looked for a decent program. So yeah. Oh, interesting. Yeah, there are some countries where if you don't have a degree, they won't hire you. That's really unfortunate. Um, Thailand's one of them. Huh. Interesting. That's really sad. I could see I could see purpose for that, especially in countries that may not have as many jobs, or where maybe the government controls that specific industry more. If that is the case, I don't know. But anytime you have a lack of jobs or you have a lack of uh, access to jobs, then it I can see why they would want to have that certain level of requirement. It's annoying to me as a developer to see that as somebody who is self-taught, um, because I don't know how many people have looked at my resume and saw that I have a master's degree and just assumed that it was in development or something relative um, to what I do. It is not. It is in theological studies. So it really has nothing to do with what I do from a day-to-day basis. Um, so I don't know how many I have had. Excuse me. I have had people actually ask about that. Why, you know, what happened there, what the thought process was. But I think most people either just don't look at it or they don't care here in the United States. So that is frustrating and annoying, especially if you can't afford training in your country, or if it's not available outside of a college or something like that, and you can't afford that. Um, yeah, that can be really frustrating. And I mean, it makes sense then why there would be a lot more people too from outside the U.S. trying to get U.S. jobs, even if it's overseas and staying where they're at, because there's much less of an emphasis on the college degree. Now, certain things I'm starting to see people want more degrees. You think of things like um, data analytics and data scientists. They tend to want more degrees there. Um, but yeah, just straight development, you don't usually see that as a problem. Bob says I'm self-taught, but I did have two mentors in my early days that really helped me learn more faster. Yeah, I am convinced that mentorship is the most important thing that you can have as a developer. That's why I created this channel. Um, I had the opportunity to mentor a couple devs at a previous job, and just seeing the way that they grew, um, the process that it took for them to grow, it just really it gave me a better appreciation for mentoring, and so I think that's the best way to do it quickly. I would prefer for somebody to attempt self learning first, but early on get a mentor of some sort, whether that's somebody at a job or somebody that they just interact with online. It's harder online. It's easier if you have mentors that are connected to your job, um, because you see them every day, you interact with them every day. It's just a better opportunity for that mentoring to work the way that it needs to work. But you can get mentoring outside of that, and that's really, in my opinion, the best way to learn and grow if you can get that. Yeah, sometimes yeah, you're dealing with low trust societies. That makes sense. Yep. An EE degree. I don't know what an EE degree is, Bob. Should I look it up? See, I'm not as smart as people want to think I am. Electrical engineering. Gotcha. See, I know how to use Google. Electrical engineering. Yeah, my son's thinking about going into mechanical engineering, I think. So that's interesting. Never had a mentor. I'm lacking best practices and other things. That is true. That's something that whether you have a mentor or not, hopefully your job will give you. Um, and again, that's one of the problems with like just tutorials, right? Just tutorials. If you're just doing a bunch of tutorials, they're not teaching you best practices. They're just teaching you how to do a thing, right? So even I'm thinking back on like the PHP tutorial that 3 hour 4 hour tutorial that I mentioned last week. That's not necessarily going to be giving you best practices. I think he typically follows best practices when he's doing that, but like he's not sitting there going, this is the best way to do it, right? Or this is best practices for doing this. um Honestly though, sometimes you need to learn the non-best practices in order to appreciate the best practices. So there is that aspect of it too. um yeah, can't spell geek without an E. That's awesome. uh can't spell lame without an ME. I get it. Okay, all right, we got some smack talk going on here. uh Yeah, the Mel, that idea that somebody with a degree is smarter is just, unfortunately, it's just bad. It just means they had a different opportunity, and not everybody has that opportunity. But so if we can create opportunities for people that don't have those opportunities, then we should do that. It's kind of funny, not to get out of programming, but most of you probably know, if or you've forgotten, I live in Kansas City, Missouri. That's home of the Kansas City Chiefs, which is the American football current twice reigning champs, the Super Bowl. But anyway, just throwing that out there. But I've been a fan since I was young, so I'm not a bandwagon fan. All right, I suffered through the years. Anyway, what was I? Why was I talking about this? I don't know. Oh, we just signed somebody who's a rugby player, right? And so he didn't have the opportunities to grow up playing American football. But we're going to give him a chance. And he came through this program called IPP, I think is the name, International something, IPP, whatever it stands for. But I was watching on YouTube a video about him going through this program, and they had their own, kind of like a college. They have their own pro day, where they go and they do all the different things that the college pro days do, so that scouts can come and see if they want to draft them, or if they want to try to sign them to a contract. And we were able to sign him to a contract, but he kind of had to go a different route from most people who get into the NFL. Most people go to college here in the United States, and then they get drafted into the NFL, or they get a contract as a undrafted free agent. And so he had to go a different route though to get in there, because he didn't have the opportunities everybody else had in the United States to learn football, to play football from little kid all the way up, right? And so he had to go a different route, and the NFL has made that possible, right? And so we as a dev community need to do what we can to do the same thing. We need to make it possible for as much as we can for people to come into this industry, and come into places where there are needs without having to go through a specific, like, this is what it always looks like, right? Um, Bob, so glad I was on the golf team in high school, took care of my PE and sporting requirements. I wish I would have had something like that. I am not a runner, and it seemed like every year I got a C in PE because you had to meet like certain times for running, and it was a huge part of your grade. It made me very frustrated, and I'm still bitter. Yeah, yeah, just keep going. But you have to be careful, CW, right? So I mean, that's good advice to just keep working. But you also need to work smart, right? Because you can spend a lot of time learning a lot of things if you don't know how they fit together, if you don't know how they work, how they fit into what you want to do. That's where a mentor comes in. They help you evaluate those things and say, hey, why are you learning all three of the major JavaScript frameworks when you want to do data manipulation, right? You don't need that. Just learn one so you're familiar with it, right? That's where a mentor comes in and says, hey, you're spinning your wheels over here. Why don't you spend some time working on this? You may not know to do that. You may not know to make that transition um, without somebody else coming in. So I would be cautious about saying just keep going, just keep working. Yes, do that, but you need to do that well. You need to do that with a perspective. You need to do that with guidance from somebody, hopefully somebody that's in the industry already, that's willing to mentor you. So I have a reader's a reader's body. I have a coder's body. It's kind of the same thing. Except readers, you can kind of lean back and read. With coding, you have to be hunched over. That's a difference. Uh, I think that's funny. I've been doing programming for a while, but it's all been pretty solo. Yeah, yeah. And honestly, when you're learning, it's going to be solo. When you're working, it's going to be solo. Um, so in many ways, get used to it. I don't. I'm not saying that to be mean, but kind of get used to it, because when you're doing your job, you're going to be working solo most of the time. Now, there's going to be times maybe you do some pair programming, things like that, but the goal is to become an independent developer. You need to become independent so that you can work on things and people don't have to micromanage you. People don't have to answer questions all the time. So the goal is to be an independent solo developer. And that often means continuing to learn new things on your own. And so that's probably, in my opinion, that's again probably why I think some of the best developers I've worked with are self-taught devs, because they already know how to do that. They know how to teach themselves the things that they need to do in order to be successful at the job. So anyway, all right, I'm going to go ahead and shut it down now. We're just over 2.5 hours. I don't want to make it to 3. So I will go ahead and put timestamps on this here this afternoon for people who are watching this later on. I'm only timestamping the main portion, FYI. Hopefully that doesn't make anybody upset, but it's easier to do that. I'll figure out if I can do that along the way while we're doing it. Hopefully that'll make things better for some of you as we go. Um, yeah, not in the dev department. Sure. No, I get it. Um, anyway, so yeah, I'll update. I'll put all the information that I said that I would put in the Dev Mentor Dave um, uh, Discord server in the channel for the project. I'll rename the project to Deep Pockets, so we'll try to remember to keep moving forward with Deep Pockets. But yeah, so we'll see you guys next week at 10 a.m. I believe I should be here. There is a weekend coming up. I've got to go out of town for child's sports event, and I will make sure I notify everybody of that ahead of time. That might be next weekend, actually. Um, but I think that's Friday. Now that I think about it. Anyway, I'll keep you guys updated. I believe I will be here next Saturday, 10 a.m. So you don't want to miss out on that, as we'll be um kind of, I don't know exactly what we're going to do next week. We'll be looking at a lot of the MVP stuff, features that have been submitted. We'll be looking probably at some diagrams that people have submitted. It'll probably be more review things next week, as opposed to adding new stuff to the project and the process. Um, but that'll be really helpful, hopefully, as we go through that, for you to see things that you might need to tweak in your process or your way of thinking. So hopefully that'll be helpful to you guys. I'll get something up on the channel here this weekend, probably, for the next one, maybe the next couple here, and get those planned out. But I will see you all next week. Thanks for jumping on and hanging out with us, even if you end up a little late like Eddie did. That's fine. Again, I'll get the timestamps in there to help those that are coming back later on to watch or rewatch. They can find what they're looking for, hopefully. So apparently I need to get off because my son just started playing piano downstairs. I don't know if you can hear that or not. So I'll see you guys next week. Thanks for jumping on here. Have a great weekend. Enjoy your weekend, holiday weekend, and we'll see you all next Saturday. So I will talk to you later.